From the thrilling pages of the DC comic,
faster than a speeding bullet,
a myth is forged.
more powerful than a locomotive,
A hero takes flight.
able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. This amazing stranger from the planet Krypton, the Man of Steel, Superman.
Hello, folks, and welcome to episode 2 of Superman Lives. This is Chris Meaux. It is Saturday, April the 23rd, 2016. I'm coming to you from Lafayette, Louisiana, through the magic of Skype. With me is my co-host, the super Michael Critzer. How are you, Michael?
I am doing well, and I am in historic Barboursville, Virginia. So how's that for technology win?
That is pretty awesome. The world is so connected because, you know, had it not been for this newfangled technology, we would never have ever met. So
that's true.
That's some of the great stuff there about the internet and all of that. Well, folks, we are glad to have you here for episode 2. I want to start off by thanking everyone who took the time to give us some feedback. Of course, we put the episode out on YouTube, and then I had never done that before, but it went through to iTunes, so it's possible you're listening to it through iTunes. And we got some feedback, which is more than I've ever received outside of Michael, who's always been very good about giving me feedback on the big show. I've never gotten that much feedback, so it was great to see, and I definitely want to thank all those folks for that. Of course, you can find, you're listening to this probably on YouTube, and then hopefully it will go through again to iTunes. So thanks so much for that feedback, and Michael and I will be using our respective pages to disseminate the second episode. So we're glad to be here. We're glad that you're joining us. And what's going on with you, Michael? Any thoughts at the top of the hour?
Not much. I'm just I'm still nervous / excited and curious about Rebirth, and I'm I enjoyed the Supergirl, so all things we'll be talking about on this episode. But yeah, I'm just I'm in a state, I guess.
Yeah, same here, and I'm really counting down the minutes to Civil War, which we are going to, of course, talk about too. I just,
Absolutely.
Even though this is a Superman podcast, in this episode, we'll be talking about how Captain America has really, in a way, taken the place, sadly, of Superman. Not replaced him, because he can't, but as far as movies go, and certainly general audience awareness, he is kind of taking that role. So we're going to talk about that coming up in this show. We are also going to talk a little bit about this wonderful storyline that overall was kind of neat. DC versus Marvel way back in 1996. And the coolest part for me was seeing the which is not a word, amalgamated, I guess, versions of Marvel and DC heroes. And of course, it probably doesn't strike you right off the top of the bat, but it fits into our theme, how Superman and Captain America might be linked. Because in that storyline, Batman and Captain America fought, and they certainly seem more similar. But Mark Waid wrote Super Soldier, and we'll talk about that, how he blended the origins of Superman and Captain America into Super Soldier. Great stuff. I would love to see Bruce Timm do an animated series on Super Soldier. But of course, that will never happen legally unless Disney buys DC Comics, which would be a dream come true.
Yeah.
And that could be a topic for a future episode. What would DC do with Superman? I mean, Disney. What would Disney do with Superman? So, well, we are going to go ahead, folks, and we will take a break. And when we get back, we're going to get to our Super News segment, which we will, as Michael already mentioned, we are going to discuss DC Comics Rebirth. We have some new information since our last episode. What will that mean for us as fans? What will it mean for the DC universe? And we're not sure yet, but we have, I think, a better picture. So we'll talk about that when we get back.
Superheroes are modern-day mythology. Well, so what? Just how do Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man operate in the way of Heracles, Vishnu, or Odin? And why is that important? Tune into Iconicast and join 3 school teachers and lifelong geeks as we research, review, and discuss the iconic influence these characters have on our culture. Subscribe on iTunes or sign up for the notifications at iconicastpodcast.com. That's iconicastpodcast.com. Stay iconic.
All right, folks, and we're back. Michael, are you able to hear any audio?
Yeah.
You
I've
are.
got the audio down.
Okay, awesome. So there you heard a promo for Iconicast, and just to plug that right now, we might as well. Michael, you guys are working on a Winter Soldier review, I believe.
Yeah, we're actually going to just kind of a Civil War preparation show. We're going to specifically go through Winter Soldier and talk about what we hope to see, what we're biting our nails for in Civil War, and just kind of the whole direction of the Captain America story arc. So that'll be fun. We're recording next weekend, so that'll be released a few days before Civil War's premiere.
Perfect timing. I'm looking forward to that. I will definitely be checking it out, as I'm sure lots of folks are going to review as much as they can leading up to Civil War. But it's gotten so, we have so many movies now that you've really got to plan weekends or stay up late when your children and your wife and family go to sleep and catch a movie.
Exactly. And I just realized there's a comic tie-in too to bridge the gap between Age of Ultron and Civil War, apparently. So
I remember they did that for Winter Soldier. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out too. Yeah. Well, awesome. If you mention that, I wonder when that comes out, like right the week before, I guess.
I actually bought it already.
Oh, you bought it already? Oh, okay. Well, yeah. we can talk about that when we talk about Cap, because
sure.
I'd be interested to know how good that is. Yeah. All right, folks. Well, in super news, back to Superman, we are going to talk to you about a few things here. Now, as we got into with episode 1, DC Comics is at it again as far as what they call a non-reboot, and it really isn't technically so far that we know a reboot. DC Comics Rebirth episode, or I should say issue, not episode, issue 1 comes out on May 23rd, I think, or 24th. It is going to be where the story starts. And what this is allegedly going to do is bring back certain elements of legacy to the DC Comics universe, which is, I think, unique and has always been unique to DC, especially with regard to the Justice Society and passing down the mantle. And then, of course, after 1985, that became one unified world. So you had heroes passing on their heroic legacy, whether through death or retirement or whatever it might have been. So since that last episode, we have learned that this will actually be, according to Jeff Johns, a 2-year storyline. Now, this caused a bit of hubbub in some of the forums that I visited since learning this, because some folks are afraid that they're going to have to buy every issue of this to tie into this 2-year storyline. Dan DiDio, of course, quickly came on Twitter to say, no, it's not going to be this very hard or, I guess, linked. There will be some tie-ins, but there will be stories that don't even tie in at all. Apparently, Earth 2, the existing Earth 2 book, will not at all tie in. It's not even being renumbered as part of the Rebirth initiative. And so there are going to be apparently other titles that will not be affected, but there is a 2-year plan for Rebirth, which I think is very interesting. Michael, what do you think about that? To me, that seems as if we're setting up to perhaps another line-wide event in 2018. What are your thoughts on that?
Probably, yeah. And, again, I'll reserve judgment for, whether it's a good idea or not, I guess, once I see it and it comes out. But, in history, I don't know if it's the wisest thing for them to make such long-term plans. I mean, that's what they did with New 52. And there was a initial boom because it brought in some new fans. But then after that waned away, there was nothing they couldn't immediately change because they'd already placed so much resources and planning into the New 52, so it just kind of fudged into the DCU, and then eventually we get convergence and stuff. So it might be great, but what happens if it falls flat on its face again? It's just yet another time that they've really kind of dipped their foot in something they can't immediately get out of. So I don't know. That's
right, absolutely, and it's frustrating because from what little we know as far as insider information, Flashpoint was not even really supposed to be a crisis type event, and so it almost seemed as if the Warner Brothers execs at DC Entertainment, which had been just newly formed at the time, ordered this to happen. And we do know for sure that the Justice League title that Jeff Johns and Jim Lee did was going to feature the Big Seven, and it was going to be in the pre-Flashpoint timeline. So I've always been of the mind that there is a way to do soft reboots, and I thought 1 year later was great after Infinite Crisis. I thought there's always a way to, the renumbering thing, treating comics as seasons, and so you have like 1 through 12, and then you renumber. Controversial, but there is something that is nice about that for the casual fan. It makes it hell for the collector who's actually trying to organize this, and I've got to, where is this going to go in the long box? But I do think there's some merit to that, instead of saying we've got to do yet another reboot. And like you said, it didn't solve any problems, and partially, I think, because like Rebirth, at least it seems, because we really don't know enough about Rebirth to make that judgment, but what frustrated me about Flashpoint, the fact that it existed, but also that Batman and Green Lantern didn't get affected by it all that much, and certainly Green Lantern was probably even bigger as far as bringing in comic sales at the time, and that has gone down. So we'll see what's going to happen with this. From Newsarama, I do have a few bits of information that was released right around the time that the latest issue of Previews came out, and apparently this was something that was very exciting to go and get previews. I didn't make it to my local comic shop to grab a copy, but did you by any chance, Michael?
I made it too late, but they had a copy there I was able to thumb through that they were just keeping on hold. So
okay, what were your thoughts looking through there? Because I didn't get a chance to see it.
My thoughts, there are some more reveals, some more specifics about the titles and stuff, but then at the same time, we're just not getting anything too specific, and it kind of reminded me of just how the information has been from DC and Warner Brothers in general right now, because they polarized their fans so much. Everything they say you have to take with a grain of salt, and they'll say one thing about this, and then they'll turn around and from the other side of their mouth say this, just so they're not ticking off different groups of fans. My example is that, okay, we're getting pre-Flashpoint Superman back, and all this kind of stuff, and there's going to be great and hope, and that was the first wave of information from Rebirth, colorful, classic, legacy, and then it came out, but don't worry, the New 52 is not going away, it's all going to be this, it's not a reboot, it's just every time they say one thing they have to say another. So I saw that a lot in the catalog as well. There were some cool reveals. Superwoman apparently is going to be Lois Lane, which I'm only assuming must be the Lois Lane from the New 52, and I'm thinking, how is that really going to work out in the same, so not a lot of specifics yet, but just some more pieces of information.
Right. And yeah, it's interesting because right now going on in the New 52 Superman comics is a storyline called The Last Days of Superman, and apparently this involves Superman in the New 52. He has gone through quite a bit physically, and so he's lost his powers, had to power himself with kryptonite, and now it appears that he's dying. He's found out that he's going to die, and so he's trying to get a super league together that is going to take his place when he goes, and that will of course also involve the pre-Flashpoint Superman. So it has been said, Jeff Johns and then Peter Tomasi, who's writing the Superman titles right now, has said that all of the Superman titles and this storyline in particular lead up to Rebirth and the future of the Superman titles going after Rebirth in June. So it just seems very hodgepodge. It's very bizarre, because if you're going to bring back the Justice Society, which certainly the cover of Preview shows these hourglasses, and one features the classic Justice Society of Earth 2, and then the other features what looks like a Justice League of America, maybe Earth 1, could just be, could really be any timeline except for the New 52. So what's happening with this? Is it going to involve the multiverse? Is it just timelines? There's a lot of speculation online, which I think DC likes people to speculate, but what happens when they just don't care to speculate anymore? And I think we're at that breaking point. A lot of people are wondering if the very end of Flashpoint, which combined 3 Earths, if that's going to be undone. But then that doesn't seem to be reflected in solicits that show us June and July, where we have the New 52 Earth, and yet we have people from other Earths on it. So, it's very confusing. Let me just read a couple of things here from Jeff Johns. He says that there are 4 themes or 4 chapters to DC Universe Rebirth. The first one is about loss. It focuses on what perhaps has gone missing in our comic books when it comes to the DC Universe, and historically what the DC Universe really is. The second chapter is about legacy. That's the main thing I feel has been lost from the DC Universe from the New 52 reboot. I disagree. That's one of them, but not the main thing. We're showing a kind of secret side of the DC Universe where legacy comes into play again. The next chapter is love, and it's all about the love that's in the DC Universe and that which has disappeared from the DC Universe. And then the fourth chapter is titled Life, which is about both the end and beginning of life. And the catalog also cites 5 moments and mysteries you won't want to miss in DC Universe Rebirth #1. Line of Fire, the mysterious death of a character. Heroes Return, 3 characters reintroduced to the DC Universe with the promise of more. Revelations, a secret that dives into the very nature of why the DC Universe is the way it is. The Dark Knight, Batman will become focused on a mystery that will change everything he knows about his greatest villain, which we know he's apparently going to find out the name of the Joker. So were this a Batman podcast, we could talk at length about what that would even mean. I just think don't even go there at all, but that's me. Multiversal Mayhem, a secret is exposed about the nature of the DC Universe and why it lost what it lost, and will introduce the greatest threat it has ever faced. Okay, and it is DC Universe Rebirth 1, scheduled for release May 25th. So a lot of vague stuff here, and yet an attempt at giving us some concrete things. And, J.J. Abrams is the master of the mystery box approach, where here's a little bit of information to keep you excited, but then you get the movie, and there's the full reveal. And that can go both ways. Here, I don't know what that means. Why it lost what it lost, and will introduce the greatest threat it ever faced. Man, at this point, what's really bigger than the Anti-Monitor, who we know, of course, is apparently in the Dark Side War storyline. So I don't. Have you read that at all, Michael?
No, I did not read that.
I haven't either, and I've tried to find summaries online. I really haven't. All I know is that we got the origin of the Anti-Monitor, and I have to think that since Johns is writing that, and he's also writing Rebirth, that there is going to be some kind of tie-in there. So, of course, the Anti-Monitor responsible for destroying the multiverse back in 1985, and, of course, it was brought back last year in Convergence. So that, of course, is just a general DC Universe-themed description of what we can expect in Rebirth. Then the July solicits came out. So this is month 2 of Rebirth. I'm not going to read all of these, but I did want to hit a couple. Certainly, this is interesting to me. Justice League Rebirth #1. So each title that's debuting in July will have a Rebirth #1 title, and then it will have just a regular #1. So there's Justice League Rebirth 1, and then there's Justice League 1. So be sure you're ready to pay twice. And this is what's interesting to me in this. A new day dawns for Earth's greatest heroes as they welcome 3 new members to the team, including Superman, ? Who is this strange visitor from a dead world? And can he be trusted? And of course, you see the photos there. It is the post-crisis, the pre-Flashpoint Superman. Dead world. That, I know we were talking about that on your page, which we haven't mentioned, Michael, the Boycott Batman v Superman page on Facebook that you created, and we were talking about this idea of dead world. How do you read that? Do you think they're talking about that continuity, or do you think they mean Krypton? Because I guess you could read it both ways.
Yeah, when I first heard it, I'm thinking about the universe, the pre-Flashpoint universe that it comes from. I didn't really think about Krypton because that wouldn't be too far different from the New 52's, origin on Krypton. I think. I assume I didn't really go far into his story arc, but even if they say the death of it, like I don't really know whether or not I can believe it or not. Right. I mean, I'm not okay with them just killing off the pre-52. The pre-Flashpoint universe at all. I need to know that it's out there somewhere at the very least. But just because they say it's dead right now, that means nothing, you know,
You're
a
right.
month later, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Because it could just be solicit speak, which is trying to get you to, you know, order these comics. And so I guess it could also just be that there was no thought put behind it at all, really. It was just to kind of tease folks. So there's that. And then we have the Superman and Action Comics solicits, which I'm not going to read all of them, but they are interesting in that Action Comics 959, I don't know if you looked at these, Michael, that looks to me like Henry Cavill Superman, which did not make me very happy at all, the cover for 959. And he's holding the body of Clark Kent. So we can only speculate at this point that it means that Clark Kent will lose his powers and not be Superman. Lois is getting them. There's going to be a new Superman title called New Superman, and it is a young Chinese boy who gets the powers of Superman. And so we can only assume that somehow his powers are being somehow sent around the world. Very weird. I just don't quite understand why you would go that route. But anyway, I'll read this one synopsis here. Clark Kent gets caught in the crossfire as Doomsday crashes through the streets of Metropolis. As Lois struggles to keep young Jonathan out of the path of destruction, can former enemies Superman and Lex Luthor stop the monster that once destroyed the city and killed the Man of Steel? Or does Luthor have other plans? So that indicates that this is not the Doomsday, which was a virus and then also a monster in New 52 continuity. This is the pre-Flashpoint Doomsday, because it looks like him. So something is not being revealed at this point, and I understand that we that's why we go by Rebirth #1. But this man, if Jeff Johns was very clear when we knew nothing about Rebirth, and he said this will be for people who have long boxes and long boxes of comics, and I just have to wonder to what extent that's going to succeed. If DC thinks we can hit our classic fans with this and also keep the new ones. If I were a new fan who'd only been around since 2011, I'd be gone, because this would completely turn me off. I don't understand these histories. I have no connection to the character, but I don't suspect there are that many of those anyway. And that's the other side of this whole thing. DC has always said the new reader. Who are these people? I don't think they really exist. I think they're kind of this mythical beast that exists. You have a better chance of finding a unicorn than you do this brand new reader that had never read comics before and came because now they're digital. I just don't think that that's the case.
No.
You know. So I will go ahead and put a link in our show notes, folks, to these solicits for July, and also this interview with Jeff Johns about DC Universe Rebirth #1, which has a great cover by Ivan Reis, or Reese, however you pronounce his last name. And it has the classic JLA in there, of course. It's a very young looking Superman, but he's in the classic uniform. And anytime I see that, makes me happy. So, so we'll see.
It is interesting too, and this might be a good segue, but overall, just from what we know right now, my current thinking is there are going to be some wonderfully solid steps in the right direction. I don't think it's going to be overall a fix, but some of those right steps that I'm looking forward to, again, just the presence of the pre-Flashpoint Superman out there in the world, reveals and stuff is great. But also, and I don't remember, it might have been an August solicit, but the Supergirl series, the new one that they're bringing on, it looks like finally we're getting a Supergirl back who might be hopeful and everything that she is in the show, because I follow a YouTuber by the name of Professor Thorgy, and he works in a comic book shop but also does these videos, and he said people are coming into the shop all the time, fans of the show, because the show's doing so well. They're like, hey, what have you got Supergirl related? And they look at their stacks there with the new 52 Supergirl, and they're like, well, don't get that one, because that's not her, and finally it looks like we might be getting a current Supergirl run that is true to the character and true to what's being shown on the show. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, because from what I know of this latest issue of I guess it's Action Comics, came out this week, last week, Superman is looking for Supergirl and finds her, and she is in National City and has made a deal to be examined by the DEO, which was already there pre-Supergirl TV show. And so they're bringing those elements in, and we have seen a more classic, more TV faithful uniform for Supergirl. So I am looking forward to that, because it would be great for our children, whether they're boys or girls, to be able to pick up a Supergirl book. Then there's going to be Super Sons, which will be Damian Wayne, which never really cared all that much for Damian Wayne, the son of Batman. Love the idea of Jonathan Kent, though, the son of Superman and Lois. So it would be great if DC finally said, hey, here's some child-friendly comics. Who'd have thought? And I just hope that they don't somehow darken that. So that does bring us to the Supergirl finale. What'd you think, Michael?
I was pretty pleased. I mean, with many of the episodes thus far this season, there are occasionally areas where I felt it could have been paced a little bit better or maybe written a little bit better. But overall, the spirit has never let me down. Just the this is what we're setting this solidly on the hopeful, storytelling, and then that reveal at the end with the pod and everything. That just got me very excited. I have my secret hopes, but I doubt they'll be realized. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Right. Well, I agree with you about the writing and the pacing. That was my biggest complaint. And I always have to be reminded. My wife usually is the one doing it, reminding me, saying, not everybody on Earth has read as much as you have, because they aren't the fans you are. So you can't apply those same expectations to this show that and she's read nothing, so she enjoys it as it is. And she finds it a little too melodramatic sometimes, but that's just because. And I just remind her, you watch stuff on soap TV, or you watch soap operas, so I don't want to hear it. It doesn't get cheesier than that. But the only thing I didn't like was that here you had this really big, and the spoilers, folks, if you haven't seen the finale already, we're going to spoil some parts. They had this huge idea of her lifting like Fort Ross into space, and then it just kind of, okay, now I'm getting saved and I'm coming back down to Earth, because we've got to have this ending, which was tremendous with the pod landing and the kiss with Jimmy. But I don't know, I just thought that was kind of, I would have maybe broken that up into, I would have made that the cliffhanger for the last episode, and then what happened, and in the season finale you could have had more personal character moments and ended that with the cliffhanger of the pod. So but again, that's just a person who's also got some writing background and is looking at those things as a story. I think it was very enjoyable, and like you said, the spirit is always there, and that's just astounding to me. My wife, she did say it's kind of cheesy, this whole hope thing, and they're going to get on here and show the symbol, and I said, no, this is not cheesy at all. This is why these characters exist. This is why, for some people, when you see the Superman symbol, it gives you a sense of hope and of power. And I said that this is in its primal, and it seems cheesy, but yet it's also something we need more of in this world. We need more cheese, and you can never have too much cheese either way, I think. But so I really was happy with it. And who do you think's in that pod, Michael?
I am secretly hoping for a Crypto or a Streaky or something like that. I just want it to be something Silver Age brilliant to come back to us. That's what I want.
That would be awesome. Well, and so my first thought was it's Crypto, because that is pretty much his origin. His pod was lost for a few years. Jor-El in the Silver Age had tested the technology on Crypto, and then Crypto was lost. Bummer. And Kal-El was a toddler, so he remembered Crypto, and then of course he crash lands. In Secret Origin, Jeff Johns brought this idea back from the Silver Age and brought back Crypto as being Kryptonian. And so you had the idea that the ship eventually found its way to Earth because it homed in on Kal-El's ship. So I would love it if it's Crypto, although on one hand I would also not like to have Crypto be Supergirl's pet, but I guess that would be okay. I mean, I really just want a Superman TV show. Come on, as much as I love Supergirl, I would love and these. How are you feeling about these? Well, let's finish with the pod, and I'll come back to that. The other possibility is that I was explaining this to my children, who I think kind of tuned out after a while. I was explaining the history of Argo City and the fact that that Supergirl's parents did not die, at least in the Silver Age. They were on Argo City and survived, and it was only till a later threat that they actually sent Kara to Earth, and they were taken by Brainiac. They were in Kandor, and she eventually gets reunited. Could this maybe be one of her parents? There was, there's a story John Byrne said that he pitched to DC with Man of Steel that he actually wanted to have Lara and Kal-El land on Earth, and then she dies. But they were against that. So are they kind of pulling from that possibility, which would be very interesting if it were her mother or her father? But I think now if it's Streaky, that would be great too. That would be so fun, to have a superpowered cat. I don't know how they would pull that off. But it would be really, really neat. And then there are other possibilities. I mean, where did it come from? Is it from the Phantom Zone? Is it from Krypton? So I thought that was a brilliant cliffhanger there that didn't frustrate you. It really excited you. Like, what is going to happen, and who could this possibly be? So, what do you think about one thing that really stood out for me in the finale that I just said after a while, come on, we really need to make peace with this. You have Kara, and you have Alex, and then you have Jean in this room in the DEO, and then there are these red boots, and it's Superman. He's just there, unconscious. I mean, come on. Are we going to ever... I was really hoping that he was going to be the one to save her after she lifted Fort Ross into space.
Exactly, yeah.
But then that didn't happen. And the other thing that didn't make sense was, in maybe the episode before, why isn't Superman helping with this? Oh, he's off planet, and then she couldn't fly under her own power in space. So I don't know. That's probably nitpicky, but what do you think about how they're handling these appearances of Superman?
Well, it ties into almost anything that I'm not so crazy about on the show. Really comes down to restrictions, I think, that the writers and producers are under. So not necessarily their fault. So like you mentioned the writing, what you said about the season finale really should have been broken into two. I firmly agree, and I also think that was true of the premiere actually. But they didn't know if the premiere would be picked up, so they had to finish an arc. For the finale, I don't even know if they knew if they were going to get a season 2 when they were filming and stuff. So they had to make sure they had it somewhere, satisfying. But the Superman appearance is the same thing. I think they would love to show classic Superman in there, but they're just getting refused at every turn by Warner Brothers, by the high ups, because they've always been so jealous and guarded about their big three characters. That's why we never got a Bruce Wayne on Smallville, which would have been wonderful, when it's ridiculous that we didn't get a Bruce Wayne on Smallville. They might get confused about the Batman movie. No one's going to get confused, and I don't know anybody, and I've never even read anybody on social media or whatever who's a big fan of the Supergirl TV show who is also a big fan of the DC cinematic movies right now. I mean, I'm sure they exist out there, but I just don't think that's a crossover they have to worry about. So I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. I fully agree with you. It's getting silly that we don't have Superman in her world right now. It's wonderful that we get the instant message conversations. It's wonderful that we know he's there for her. I love that. I want more of that. But he needs to physically be there for her at some point. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and that's true. It is Warner Brothers' very bizarre schizophrenic approach to what characters can be used. You're right. I'd forgotten about that with Smallville. And I just don't know why you can't have... Well, I wonder if there's not a fear that if it's less... Because that's always been their line. Oh, well, people will be confused. I mean, I think that the consumer of today is much more savvy than they were in, say, 85, which is why Crisis got rid of multiple Earths. Now people are well versed in different versions of different characters, and it doesn't turn them off at all because they're interested in it. I just wonder if they are doing this because they know these shows are more popular than their movies, and if they're afraid, well, what if we end up having Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman in a TV show and they're more popular than the movies? Do we not make these giant movies anymore? Yeah. My answer would be yes. Yeah. Or here's a thought, put these folks on your movies as well and make one big connected... Boy, that would be amazing. Yeah. I don't think it'll ever happen, but you never know. I mean, I think going back to Rebirth, this is a last gasp for DC Comics, and it wouldn't surprise me if there's not some kind of editorial executive house cleaning that goes on, and somebody might say, look, we're faltering, even though of course we found out this week or last week the Batman solo movie is going to be greenlit, and Justice League apparently is still going on. I think that there's going to be a lot of rewrites on that, so we'll see. But overall, folks, if you haven't watched Supergirl, now that the season's over, it is your chance to go and watch them. And I'm going to make a request to you. I know times are not easy for some folks monetarily, for a lot of people, but try to download these so that you can send a message to CBS and Warner Brothers. We want season 2, because like Michael said, we don't have a guaranteed season 2 right now, which I don't understand why that is. That kind of makes me nervous. But it's such a positive show that you can watch with your whole family. There's some, kind of not racy, but suggestive stuff in there for the adults. But it's a very inspirational show, and especially for girls. I mean, I think there's nothing on the air like it, where none of these characters, if you've noticed, are sex symbols. And that's one of the things I love about it. Supergirl's not dressed like she was pre-Flashpoint in that Michael Turner outfit. She looked like a hooker, sorry to say. I just like that there are positive role models for girls.
And it's really not that expensive. I mean, you go on Amazon, you can get the entire season for about $30, and it's that's a night at the movies nowadays. So
that's right. And without the hassle, you don't have to leave home, and you can make your own cheaper popcorn. Absolutely. So folks, do that. I don't know when season 1 will be, or if it will even be on Netflix. Generally, those seasons don't go up until the second season starts, or like a week before. So don't wait until then, folks. I don't know if there have been any petitions started to get it renewed, but if not, I'm sure those are coming. So I don't want to see it go the route of Constantine, and that was always my fear on CBS, one of the big 3 networks. My fear was this may get mishandled. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for a miracle there. Well, folks, we are going to take a break. Mike, do you have anything else on any of this, or?
Nope. I think we've wrapped it up.
All right. We are going to come back, folks, and we'll take a break. When we get back, we're going to talk about this USA Today article that suggests that Captain America may have replaced Superman as the United States superhero symbol. And very interesting stuff here. So we're going to talk about that when we return. So come on back.
When Captain America throws his mighty shield, all those who chose to oppose his shield must yield. It is led to a fight, and a duel is due, then the red and the white and the blue will come through when Captain America throws his mighty shield.
All right, folks, they don't write the theme songs for superhero shows like that anymore. That is awesome. This, of course, was the Marvel Superheroes cartoons from the 60s. Gave us the very iconic Spider-Man series, which had the iconic Spider-Man theme that just about everybody on Earth knows. And it was really nothing more than motion comics. I mean, they just kind of took the panels right out of the comics and animated a little bit of it. But I grew up with those, and those were great. So I wanted to play that to intro this idea that Captain America has replaced Superman as our iconic good guy. You could say Boy Scout, you could say whatever you want to say as far as whatever your ideas of good, that he's replaced Superman in the popular consciousness. And that, as sad as that is to say for a Superman fan, it seems to be the case, because this article makes a very good point about how many movies Captain America has been in versus how many we've seen this not-so-Superman in. And so, I mean, a lot of people know Captain America more, and then you look at marketing and merchandising, he's everywhere. And I love that because I was always a fan of Cap. So it's great to see that. I just wish that you could walk into a toy aisle or wherever and you had classic Superman and classic Captain America together. That would be the dream. So let's talk a little bit about it, Michael. How do you look at this whole idea that Cap has maybe supplanted Superman?
Well, my first reaction to it is to think, okay, well, certainly currently, as of right now, this moment in our culture and history, if you want to look at the inspirational hero, you look at Captain America, not the Superman that's being portrayed by Warner Brothers and DC. But, I think, well, there's such a legacy. I mean, he's never going to fully replace. But then I'm always reminded with my students, I teach that college class on constructing American heroes, and it's no insult to to people of a certain age. I mean, from anywhere from teen to late 20s, it's just a matter of your perception of time and your perception of history. It takes a while to really get past this idea that only the things that are happening in your time period are, really monumental, and you start to really, the past really means this long past, and you start to get a better scope of history and cultural moments. So for my students right now, like when I mentioned last time, I think when I say that Batman's a detective, they're like, what? Mm-hmm. Because, that wasn't a trait that was shown in the Nolan films. And when I talk about Superman, the classic iconic Superman, I try to say all the traits he's supposed to stand for. Time and again, they say, oh, like Captain America. So it's just if you don't keep showing this character in a certain light for long enough, then the next generation really does forget that. It's not in their cultural memory there. So yeah, it's horribly sad. Like you said, it's horrifying for a Superman fan to admit, but it's absolutely true. I think in terms of the wholesome American spirit type character, there are some archetypes. I can talk about in a second once we try to, but differences. But in terms of the wholesome American spirit character, yeah, it's Captain America that I think the average person would point to, not Superman.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he's. I loved Cap because I had a very vague memory of him as a kid, but then when I got into comics heavily and I was reading pretty much everything from both companies back when that was affordable to do, I love this guy. He was never cheesy to me. He was never square, to use an old term. And I just thought, why would anybody think this guy isn't cool? And one of the reasons was that the Marvel Universe thought he was cool. And when they would talk about Cap in a comic book, it was always with this awe that Superman also had. And I love the stories, that we had in the 90s. And so to me, the idea, but Cap was really never a mainstream character. And it's ironic because he has been around almost as long, only by a year, really, with Batman and 2 years with Superman. He is a golden age character, and it was brilliantly brought back into the Marvel universe in the 60s. And so the idea that if you'd have told me one day, yeah, people are going to know Captain America as being more symbolic of truth, justice, and the American way than Superman, I thought you were crazy, because when I was a kid, everybody knows Captain America because he's wearing the flag, but beyond that, they probably aren't familiar. They might know the Reb Brown TV show from the 70s, but it's pretty weak. So it is an amazing thing, and definitely there are differences, but it's just very ironic to me that we've seen that, and it goes back to how Marvel Studios, and by extension Disney, sees their characters and has a commitment to portraying their characters. So they aren't about deconstructing, and they're not about my version of these characters. They're about the characters, and we're going to present them to you and let those characters decide what the story will be. So now you were going to talk about some of the differences. Well,
yeah, I think that there is hope if Warner Brothers ever decides to turn around and do this correctly, or DC or whatever. But from a mythological archetype standpoint, Captain America, he's one of us who's exhibiting the best of us in terms of traits, values. So he's Beowulf, or he's Achilles. He's something like that. Superman is a little bit of that, but Superman's also, the Christ figure, which really goes back to even longer than Christ. I mean, we've got the God walking among us, so right. Whether it's Christ, whether it's Osiris, whether it's Thor, whether it's, anybody like that. He's also the sun god, a little bit of that archetype as well. I mean, there's so many, he gets his strength from the sun, so many images of that. So I think if you turn around and started writing Superman more iconically, even now, I don't think it would be hard to turn that around and restore his place, which is my little bit of hope there. Whether they'll do that, we'll see. But right. But Cap is definitely getting his proper iconic treatment, and it's really showing. So
yeah, and it is good that at least there is someone out there, hero-wise, to show that, because Batman, which again, with this could be and can be, I think we could fit it in somehow into an episode. Batman was not always. We talked about this when I was a guest on Iconicast. Batman, if you look at when he was returned to his dark side, his noir roots in the 70s with Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams, he was not made into this paramilitary jackass who was grumpy and thought he was better than everybody, and he was the smartest man in the room. He was intense, he was driven, he was a weird creature of the night, but he was not this guy that sadly, and I don't know how much, I got into an interesting discussion about that recently on Facebook. How much do we blame Frank Miller for that? Well, he certainly started the ball rolling, but it wasn't his fault that DC decided to turn the main continuity version of Batman into that. Yeah. So we're seeing reflected in the movies with Nolan. He's not even a detective. He has everything handed to him. He could just be you or me, and that's a great archetype to explore. That's a kind of more of a Peter Parker aspect, but that's not Batman. You're losing what makes him unique there. He's not a genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. But we're getting a version of that in Marvel, right? Yeah. And then also, he is not this dark killer that we sadly have seen in Nolan. We even saw a little bit of it in Burton, and now we're seeing it in these new movies where he's using guns, and so I'm glad that there's someone standing for truth, justice, and the American way. And there was a lot of talk. I remember before the first Avenger, a lot of people said this is going to be where these Marvel films, which were still very young, we'd only had Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, if we can count it, and I guess we should, and then Thor. And so a lot of people said this is where it's going to fall apart because Captain America is too jingoistic. He is not going to resonate with people around the world outside of America. And boy, were they wrong, because he wasn't presented as, kind of the Mark Miller, the Ultimate Comics version of Captain America, who was a little bit like that. He was presented as a guy who stands for what's right. It doesn't matter if you're American, where you're from. That is something that is universal. So he stands for those universal truths and truth, justice. And I think what most people would like to hope the American way is honor and self-sacrifice, loyalty, respect for life, all of these things. I think folks would like to believe that that's what we strive for here in America, but we're not the only place that does either. So, so they've brilliantly done that with Cap, and the fact that I'm more excited about a Captain America movie than I am a Superman movie is bittersweet. Because I love both, but my heart is probably more with Superman. Cap's my favorite Marvel character, so for him to finally get his due is phenomenal, and I'm excited to see it, because he could have easily been damaged or in some way badly portrayed, and that would have just been awful. Like it would have been what we're seeing with Superman. Any other thoughts on Cap?
Well, I'd just like to read this quote. I think that it really echoes and sums up everything you were saying, but it's from the article, and they were interviewing David Farrisi, the editor from the film site Birth Movies Death. And it says, the argument about Superman has always been, he's too hokey, he's too corny, he doesn't fly today. But those same qualities work for Captain America, who made his debut in comics fighting Nazis in 1941. When you're watching Adolf Hitler rise to power and the war begin in Europe, the idea of this character with the simplicity of decency, and it resonates. And it still resonates today. So I just thought that was a brilliant thing to bring out in the article.
Absolutely. And Devin Faraci, I believe, is the guy who wrote just a wonderful piece that I think you had put on Boycott Batman v Superman. He wrote about the death of Superman in these current movies, not the literal death, but the fact that he's, for all intents and purposes, gone. And he apparently is a huge fan of the original iconic Superman. So the fact that he's writing this, I think, is really great. And if I'm at Warner Brothers and I'm seeing these connections, I would be concerned. I would start to wake up. But yes, that's beautifully said. And he also mentions, I think in the article, he says the times we're in now are not necessarily less grim or more grim than they were in 1938 or during the war. And he's right. I mean, you could say that times are worse now, but I don't know. World War II was pretty bleak. So the fact that a character like that had an appeal, to me, it's just common sense, and it's brilliant that you can have a character that people want because they are desperate for some hope and some positivity, and Marvel has gone that route, and DC has not, sadly.
Absolutely.
And I was making this argument online recently too. What if, in defending Marvel movies versus the DC stuff, what if after Iron Man was such a hit, if Marvel Studios said, let's Iron Manify all of our characters? So we'll make Steve Rogers this kind of smarmy kind of arrogant jackass, kind of like Tony Stark is. And if you'd have done that to every character, then what's the point of having them? Just do Iron Man, And in the same way, just have Batman. And that looks to be where Warner Brothers is going there. So well, folks, Steve Rogers returns in the comic books. If you're not following that, he was aged. I don't remember the exact way that happened, but he will be one of 2 Captain Americas. So there is some synergy, whether it's, I don't know how conscious those companies are doing that, but Marvel and DC both have their iconic superhero in the form of Cap and Superman with multiple versions now. There are even multiple versions of Spider-Man. So I think that's only more telling that people are able to accept that and could easily accept that in television as well. So we will find out what's going to happen next to Cap. Any predictions for Civil War? We said we would talk a little bit about it.
My prediction is that they will kill Steve Rogers. I don't know for sure, but we know he did die in the comic book. My prediction is he'll be sacrificed or something like that, but he'll probably come back in Infinity War because of the time gem and all that kind of stuff. So
right, and that's kind of where I think it's going to go too. Sadly, I don't want to see that happen. I was kind of hoping they were going to go the route of killing off Tony Stark for a while, because he's Robert Downey Jr. has made it clear he's done. He doesn't want to make any more solo Iron Man movies, but it was released this week that he will be a part of the new Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Homecoming. So the fact remains that he will still be kicking around. I would have liked to have seen him die temporarily, because I think anybody who's off the board will be back in Infinity War. And it would have been neat to see Rhodey take over, as happened in the comics. So that would have been a neat little thing to go, a little route to go. But we know that Sebastian Stan, who plays Bucky, he and the Winter Soldier, he has more movies in his contract than Chris Evans does. So he's very likely going to take up the Shield. So I hate to see it happen, but I can see why they would go that route. That was an extremely popular storyline, and they've been setting this up for a while. Even so far as having Bucky wield the shield in the first Avenger and hold it again in Winter Soldier. So I think the clues are there. So, and the beauty is that even if that happens, it's going to be very moving, because we care about Steve Rogers.
Exactly.
And we love Captain America. Whereas what happened at the end of Batman v Superman, no, I don't think anybody cared, because, No. So, well, folks, I'll have a link to this USA Today article for you. You can check it out. And when we get back, we are going to talk about a really neat combination of Superman and Captain America. It really illustrates how similar they are, and also how different they are. It is a Super Soldier from 1996 after the DC versus Marvel crossover. We're going to take a break, and when we get back, we will discuss that and review those issues. My name's Chris Meaux. I put the Chris Meaux in a mostly weekly podcast called The Big Show with Chris Meaux. The Big Show is a unique blend of late-night comedy stylings, the latest geek and pop culture news and commentary, movie, TV, and comic book reviews, and more. You can find The Big Show at thebigshow.com, show spelled SHEAUX, on iTunes by simply typing in SHEAUX, on Facebook at facebook.com/The Big Show, Twitter at Big Show, and Big Show video spelled VIDEAUX, on YouTube. Please tune in and be sure to share The Big Show with Chris Meaux with people you know. All right, folks, and we're back, and The Big Show with Chris Meaux had all the endless contact information there, so you can get in touch with me there and have a new episode this weekend. So be on the lookout for that. Well, in 1996, something happened that the lawyers of both companies had allowed to happen once in the early 80s, and that was a crossover between DC and Marvel. And the background for this story was that it wasn't going to just be the characters meeting. It was going to actually have some kind of cosmic arrangement that would happen. And we saw it again years later in JLA Avengers, which is, I think, just a wonderful storyline. Yeah. We'll have to discuss that at some point. And so while DC versus Marvel wasn't that great as as a main series. It really kind of lacked something. I think it had too many cooks in the kitchen, as it were, because it was written by committee. Some of it, the amalgam portion of this storyline was wonderful, because what this did was, I believe after issue 6 of DC versus Marvel, the Marvel and DC universes are combined into one history, which has been for me a dream. What would that be like if you combined them? Now, I would do it more to where they're actually separate heroes, but what if Clark Kent, knew Peter Parker and they were friends, or Jimmy Olsen rather, and Peter Parker were, comparing notes on photography and all this. So, and Bruce Wayne and Tony Stark are rivals. I mean, there's just so much you could do. So the idea here, though, was that their universes were combined and their stories became intricately linked. So that allowed for things like the Dark Claw, who was an odd but still fun combination of Wolverine and Batman, which I would not have ever put together, but okay. But those were the huge, money-making characters in 1996, so it made sense from that standpoint. You had Wonder Woman combined, I believe, with maybe Thor. I don't remember offhand. You even had a weird Superboy who was at the time a clone of Superman, and the clone of Peter Parker, who we didn't know was a clone. We thought he was Spider-Man during the Clone Saga. They were combined into Spider-Boy, which I'm surprised has never been a character they've returned to in some other form. And so it was really just a fun thing. You did get to see team-ups, or not only team-ups, but fights. Cap versus Batman, it was a stalemate. Superman versus the Hulk, Superman won. Wolverine versus Lobo, and Wolverine beat Lobo, which I don't see that happening, but okay. No. But it was fun overall, but it was the amalgam stuff that was great. And so you had Super Soldier. And to just give a very brief summation of what this was, the Kal-El ship lands in 1938, which is a nice nod to when Superman arrived on the scene in the real world, and he sadly dies. He doesn't survive the landing. So his DNA is spliced into the Super Soldier serum, which is given to an F4 weakling named Clark Kent, who is imbued with these powers after instead of Vita rays like with Cap, we have solar radiation, which activates those Kryptonian genes, and he gets some of Superman powers. And the brilliant thing is that the costume is a combination of Cap's uniform and Superman's uniform without the cape, but it was just wonderfully put together. And then another brilliant thing, Cap's shield, or Super Soldier shield, I should say, is the S shield. So that was a brilliant thing that I really want an action figure of that. I just think it would look so great. So you have these amalgamated characters, and you have following more Captain America's history, I suppose, because it takes place during World War II, of course, and you have Super Soldier's adventures there, which actually came out in a second one-shot called Man of War, Super Soldier Man of War. We got to see his World War II adventures, but in the first issue, we are actually seeing, kind of again going with Captain America route, we see Super Soldier returning, found by the JLA, which was the Judgment League or something like that. It was some kind of weird amalgamation. And we see Clark Kent going to work at the Daily Planet, and of course the chief of the Daily Planet, the editor, is Jimmy Olsen, who was, of course, kind of like Bucky for Clark in World War II. So really fun stuff. I don't think that these are on Comixology, but you can find them on eBay and other places. So, Michael, what were your thoughts about these?
Well, it was a lot of fun to read. Just first off, anything that Mark Waid touches, I've never been disappointed. No. There are some things I've liked more than others that he's written, but he's a master at his craft, so I thought that was great. The art was wonderful. It wasn't too stylized or too crazy, because you couldn't really do something like that when you're trying to bring two iconic universes together. You have to kind of pull from what's best of the both of them. But yeah, I was just shocked at how many elements were just, I wasn't shocked at how many elements seamlessly integrated themselves just without any kind of problem at all. Like you said, the costume, his character, who he is, the way he acts, I mean, the same person. I mean, it's just wonderful, for both of those characters. But I was surprised at how many parts of their universe, when combined, actually really developed this weird separate thing. I mean, like you said, the elements of being in World War II and then coming back, but then going to work for the Daily Planet. So you've got Sharon and Peggy and Lois Lane and all of these playing different roles, and there's Lex, but then there's he's sort of like a Red Skull type, and then there's
Right.
Zemo, and so it made me think about how many parts of their universe, and I guess it goes back to what I said too about the different sort of archetypes they embody. Is even though their characters fit together so seamlessly, the types of stories that are told about them and the universes they come from tend to be pretty separate missions, I guess.
Right. And Cap is more of a soldier. That's always been, to the point where he did use a gun occasionally during the war, and Superman has no need for that. But yet they're the archetypes of being this inspirational and aspirational hero have always been there, and so they fit together wonderfully. And I can remember when this came out, I had been a huge fan of Mark Waid from his Flash run, and I began to follow anything he did. And when he went to Captain America, briefly before he got sadly shafted by Marvel, because Marvel said, all this great stuff you're doing, bye-bye, we're going to give it to Rob Liefeld. That was Heroes Reborn. Oh, God. I mean, that is one of the worst pieces of art I've ever seen. The picture of Cap, his chest looks like you could serve lunch on it, like it's some kind of table, and then the eagle on the forehead instead of the A. So Waid had this wonderful run where Mark Gruenwald, who wrote Cap for many, many years, from the 80s and 90s, and I read some of that, he had left Cap in really a terrible position. No super soldier serum. He was dying. And here, Mark Waid, you have to figure out how to bring him back. And that was Operation Rebirth. That was the name of the storyline. Brilliant stuff that Mark Waid used. So he has always loved Cap, and he has always loved Superman. So he was the perfect guy to write these. And then you have Dave Gibbons on art, which is just tremendous. And I really would love to see more of this. From what I understand, Marvel and DC are not in the same place they were after Paul Levitz left and Dan DiDio took his place. I understand that is why you're not going to ever see this happen again under this current management, because there's some bad blood there. But apparently Paul Levitz didn't have any problems with Joe Quesada and whoever was before him, Bob Harris. So, they were able to get together and do stuff like this, and then JLA Avengers, which is just a great... that is another wonderful story that almost feels like it's written by Mark Waid, too. So Amalgam Comics was the fictional comic company that published these. So you have Dark Claw, Spider-Boy, Super Soldier, and I'm biased, but I think Super Soldier's the best of all of those. So you can find them. If I find any links to them, folks, I will put it up there in the show notes for you. And, you just never know. It would be great if Disney somehow, and it'll never happen, but if they did buy DC, then we, who knows what we could have. But maybe things will get better after a change in management on one side or the other, and we'll have a return to Amalgam. Excuse me. If I were running things now with a nostalgia boom that we have going on, I would do a sequel to this post haste, because there's a lot of people, and plus with the bigger profile of the Marvel characters now, I think that would really sell well. But we shall see. Well, folks, that's DC versus Marvel, and then Super Soldier and Super Soldier Man of War, and I'll have links and some information for you if you can't find the comics. They aren't in Comixology, and I'm guessing there's not a demand for them. So, but hopefully you'll be able to hunt them down on eBay. We're going to take a break. When we get back, we will wrap up this new episode of Superman Lives.
Gathered together from the far reaches of the internet are assembled a network of podcasts dedicated to the first and greatest superhero, Superman. The Superman Podcast Network is dedicated to covering all aspects of the Superman legend, featuring
Superman and Batman,
Golden Age Superman,
the Superman Fan Podcast,
The DC Comics Presents Show,
From Crisis to Crisis, a Superman podcast,
It's Superman, the Schuster Herald Podcast,
the Kara Herald Podcast,
Superman Forever Radio,
Superman Lives,
Up, Up, and Away,
Cadmus to Crisis, a Superboy podcast,
The Armored Hero Steel, a John Henry Irons podcast.
The world's best podcast.
And
Radio Kale from SupermanHomepage.com.
Join hosts
Michael Bradley,
John Wilson,
Billy Hogan,
Charlie Niemeyer,
Russell Bride,
Jeffrey Taylor,
Michael Bailey,
Scott Gardner,
Sam Rizzo,
Danny Saab,
Bob Fisher,
Chris Moe,
Mario Benessi,
Will Wintermeyer,
David Byer,
Matthew Epps.
I'm Isaac.
I'm Adam.
Steve Eunice, and co-host Scotty V.
at SupermanPodcastNetwork.com.
All right, folks, there's a promo for the Superman Podcast Network, of which Superman Lives is a member. You can find some of these other great podcasts. I have tried out a few of them, and there's something for everybody. Every fan of any fan of any era or version of Superman, you will find something you enjoy. I really do like Michael Bailey's podcasts. He does Views from the Long Box, but he also does From Crisis to Crisis, and I've really enjoyed following that series when I can. Which brings up a topic that we will mention now here, just to kind of whet the appetites. It's still a ways off, like a long time, but folks, 2017 is the 25th anniversary of the death of Superman. So I was thinking, Michael, and I'm just throwing this at you live here, but I think we should try to do a special series when that, for the 25th anniversary, and really dive into the death of Superman, because that, to me, that's what got me hooked, and I think it still stands up today as a wonderful storyline. So
absolutely,
that would be a lot of fun to do that.
We also have the 10-year anniversary of Superman Returns. I come thinking June or July this month.
That's right.
Year. Yeah,
I forgot about that. And speaking of podcasts, I listened to a Kevin Smith podcast, which I said I would explain this in the last episode. But folks, we get our name for this podcast from the aborted Superman Lives, which was written originally by Kevin Smith. And I disagree with him on some things. He's gaga for this new DC expanded universe. I mean, movie universe. But what I respect him for is that he wrote the original Superman Lives script, and it's very faithful to the character. And so if you haven't read that, folks, you can find it on SupermanHomepage.com. They have a lot of scripts there you can find. And I read it, and it is wonderful. I mean, it really reflected the death of Superman, but it was Superman. He was married to Lois. She knew who he was. That had never been seen in a movie. And so I thought, man, this would have been a great movie. And then, of course, it never happened because Tim Burton came in and he wanted to redo things and fired Kevin Smith. So, but where I was going with that was, I don't know where I was going with that, actually, Michael. Just talking about the fact that that's where we got the name from. But there was something else. I don't remember.
Superman Returns.
Superman Returns. Thank you. On Kevin Smith's podcast, Fat Man on Batman, he had Brandon Routh, and he was talking to him about how he got the gig as Superman, and it made me so sad that history isn't a little different. Because what if Superman Returns had just been a little better, and we would have gotten a sequel to that movie? Imagine what would have happened. Because he was perfect for the role. In that episode, that interview with Kevin Smith, he's talking about his small town upbringing. He's from Iowa. He's just a kind of a geeky guy, but he looks like Superman and Christopher Reeve. But he would have brought, I think, if he had a better script, he would have been this generation Superman.
Absolutely.
So it's so sad. But yes, Superman Returns, we should talk about that, I think. Maybe in the next episode, look back at 10 years, because this is not a horrible movie. You can find a horrible Superman movie. There's been 2 of them, sadly, since 2013. It isn't horrible. It's not perfect. And it has some problems, but Superman is still intact. And we could definitely get into that. There is also something, folks, if you go to fanedit.org, search for that, there are a lot of fan edits of the original Christopher Reeve Superman films and Superman Returns. And there is one that takes out Jason as Superman's son. So, maybe we could watch and review that. That would also we could do that at some point as well. So there's so much we can talk about. Let us know your feedback, folks. Get in touch with us. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for Superman Lives Podcast, and we're also on iTunes now. And Michael, where have you just been sharing on your pages, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I'm sharing them on the Facebook pages, the iconic Superman, iconic Wonder Woman. There's a bunch of them, but if you go to iconicastpodcast.com, then there's a list of all of our Facebook pages on the right, and then you can also find out about our podcast and such. So that's iconicastpodcast.com. And I do briefly just want to mention my own personal YouTube channel I've just started, doing nothing but sort of academic / geeky analyses of superhero stories, and I just released one a week or two ago on Superman for All Seasons. So Superman Lives listeners might be interested in checking that out, and that channel is called Professor Geek. I don't have a nifty URL yet because you need 100 subscribers before you can get one of those, so if you just search for Professor Geek on YouTube, you'll find that as well. So.
Okay, yes, I saw it, and I haven't had a chance to watch any, but I definitely want to, folks. It's gold right there, so go and check out Michael's YouTube channel there. And Superman for All Seasons, we could definitely open that, because that, for one episode would be great to talk about. I mean, that's another iconic story that fit right in with continuity. Jeff Loeb, why aren't you still working for DC? Why aren't you, Jeff Loeb, in charge of the DC cinematic universe?
Absolutely.
I mean, Jeff Loeb wrote Commando. I mean, that works for me, and then you get J. Michael Straczynski in there. He loves the classic Superman. You get Brad Bird to direct. You get Brandon Routh maybe back as Superman. I don't know. It's all there.
Yeah.
So, all right, folks. Well, thank you so much for listening, and let us know what you thought of episode 2. We appreciate your listens. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're listening to us through YouTube, and even if not, go and search for us. And we will be back shortly with another exciting episode of Superman Lives. Until then, take care and stay super.
Stay super.
Superman Lives can be found on YouTube, iTunes, the Superman Podcast Network at supermanpodcastnetwork.com, and on the podcast's Facebook page, Superman Lives Podcast. Send feedback, suggestions, and questions to hosts Chris Meaux and Michael Critzer at supermanlivespodcast@gmail.com. All music featured in the Superman Lives broadcast is the intellectual property of Warner Brothers. Superman and all related characters are the intellectual property of DC Comics, a division of DC Entertainment. Superman Lives is intended solely for the purpose of entertainment and does not in any way profit from its production or content. Superman Lives is a production of Big Show Studios and Iconic Superman on Facebook.